Hey everyone, welcome back to another recap podcast from SNXweave, where we give quick weekly recaps of news and important updates from the previous week from the Spartan Council and core contributors, as well as discuss what the Grants Council and ambassadors are up to, so let's get started. SIP 239 has been implemented as the sole SIP of the Rosselhog release. As a reminder, this recovered and paid out unallocated liquidation rewards to L1 and L2 stakers. It was originally planned that a few other SIPs would go out on this release as well, but some have been pushed to a separate release, CoCab and SAFE. The CoCab release also went out last week, implementing SIP 246 to upgrade collateral shorts. This fixed a few accounting bugs that were recently discovered in the collateral short contract. It also introduced an owner function to be able to purge debt from the old contract and remove the collapse fee rate since it was not being utilized. On the upcoming SAFE release, several SIPs are scheduled to go out. The first is SIP 235 to update the issuer modifier. This SIP adds another required check to the only trusted minters modifier in issuer in order to greatly increase the overall security of the system going forward. This SIP has been voted on and approved with 8 votes in favor. Next is SIP 238 to only allow token transfers via their proxies. This SIP will modify the system so that users will only be allowed to interact with SNX as well as Synths via their proxies and stop allowing transfers via their implementations. This SIP has not yet been voted on. The next is SIP 240 to update the liquidate amount. This SIP liquidates the correct amount of debt for accounts with mostly escrowed SNX. At last week's presentation, Mark explained that SIP 240 corrects an issue in the new liquidation mechanism that was a niche case and luckily only impacted a few users. This SIP has been voted on and approved with 6 votes in favor. And lastly, SIP 243 to deprecate SDFi. This SIP will deprecate SDFi and open it for redemption at the latest price available on chain. Gumbos presented this last week, explaining that the reason for this SIP was that the index had Luna in it, and the team doesn't have the manpower to manage the index manually. Redemption for the synth would be an SUSD at the current price, effectively similar to the equity synth deprecation. This SIP has been voted on and approved with 5 votes in favor. There are a couple of other SIPs that were also presented last week, SIPs 245 and 241. SIP 245, presented by Daniel, proposed allowing a 50% buffer for burning during the minting cooldown. Daniel explained that the motivation behind this SIP was actually a product of Thales' experience staking SNX on Optimism using a multisig. Due to the volatile price of SNX, by the time they collect the signatures for a particular action, the action pushes them out of the target zone. He therefore proposed adding a larger buffer for burning during the 7-day cooldown. Kane mentioned that there are only a handful of multisigs claiming SNX weekly. The council came to an agreement that this SIP is probably not a high priority for V2X right now, so it was rejected and Mark will be doing some feasibility on it. Lastly, for SIP presentations, Millie presented SIP 241 to update the original KPI-based Ambassador Mandate SIP. There were 2 modifications made to this original SIP. The first was to remove KPI metric number 4 for coordinate tracking. And the next was to add a KPI metric for written content, such as blogs and Twitter threads. This SIP was voted on and approved with 7 votes in favor. The council also discussed the recent community debates regarding raising the C ratio back up to 400%. Kane wanted to point out that incremental increases would also be an option, emphasizing that we need to be mindful of what kind of pressure any changes will put on the network, so that stakers aren't being encouraged to self-liquidate in order to correct their C ratio. Consensus was reached that there should be some more price stability in SNX before making changes to the C ratio. Lastly, on the V3 front, the V3 GM election module is currently in audit. The first V3 release went out last week for this governance module, deploying 4 systems, 1 for each council. The contracts have been initialized and nominations are set to begin on June 10th, with voting opening on June 17th and the new epic beginning on July 1st. This will be the first fully on-chain elected governance body for Synthetics. The V3 team is also currently in the process of writing product SIPs. Ali has written a SIP detailing the architecture of V3, but the team has experienced some delays with all of the urgent work that needed to be done to finish out V2X. In Grants Council updates, The team has set up a follow-up meeting with the stats page developer to discuss, among other things, some performance suggestions that Duck came up with that may improve how the data is displayed and the responsiveness of the page. For the Flash Loans project, Alexander raised a good question. Will this functionality be available in V3? Mike thinks there will be a similar loan functionality in V3, but the team will confirm this before dedicating resources to this project. Lastly, for the NFT project, there's still quite a bit of design work that needs to be done. The team is very happy with what they have produced so far and is very excited for the final product. However, the design team is now expecting another 6 to 8 more weeks before designs are completed. CT and Duck also scheduled a meeting with the Universe XYZ team to discuss progress on the marketplace side of the project. In Ambassador Council updates, the Key Performance Indicator report is in for May. As a reminder, this new KPI system came from the SIP that we previously mentioned that Millie wrote to give the ambassadors more structure in their role and maintain accountability. Be sure to check out our blog post for a full list of the KPIs, and great job this past month, ambassadors. And that's it for today's updates. Be sure to check out our weekly recap blog post, share this podcast link, and let us know what you think and what you'd like to hear more about from SNXweave. Thanks for listening.